Hey everyone, Taylor Torrance here from Cosmic Academy, and today we are talking about a really important aspect that I am not hearing talked about enough in the videos that I'm seeing, and that is the difference between using effects like reverbs and delays directly on the channel as a plugin insert, as opposed to using them on sends and return channels. Now, there are some amazing mixing benefits that we get by using these type of effects on sends and return channels. We can really clean our mixdowns up, get a more polished and professional sound. But if you're already familiar with that aspect, stick with me because I also want to show you how doing things this way can also unlock a couple of creative opportunities that aren't really related to mixing, but more just help with interesting things that you can do in your production process. So let's jump into Ableton and I'll show you guys exactly what I'm talking about. All right, so we are in Ableton. I put together kind of a simple house project today. I had a lot of fun putting this together. It's kind of a fun one, and I'll play it through. But while I was doing it, I set up a couple of instruments that are using return channels for their effects, like delays and reverbs. And I'm in Ableton, so we in Ableton, we're using these things called return channels. Basically, they show up down here at the bottom, and if I click Insert Return Channel, it creates a new one. And then on every channel or group, I get a new slider that's associated with that return channel, and that is the send knob. Now, on other DAWs, it's different. You can look up how exactly to do this if you're in a different DAW. I know on Logic, for instance, it's like a little knob that appears on every channel, and you can set the sends to create, I think, up to like 128 different return buses or send buses, different things like that. Look into exactly how to do that. I want to focus today on what the benefits are of doing it and the ways in which we can use it creatively. So, what I did in this project is I set up a couple of these return channels. I'm going to walk you through some of the benefits and what I'm doing on some of these return channels. So let me just play through this little loop, this little project that I have going, and then you guys can get the vibe. And then I'll show you a couple of different mixing benefits we're going to get, and we'll go through it together. All right, so you guys get the vibe here, really housey, kind of future, and there's a lot of interesting stuff going on here kind of behind the scenes. So let's just, let me solo some of this stuff and you guys can hear what some of these instruments sound like in solo before I jump into the return channels. All right, so now you guys have a good idea of what this project consists of, and let's jump into a couple of these different ways that I'm using these return channels. And let's start with why to use a return channel as opposed to a reverb or a delay or some other effect directly on the channel. So let's take this main lead, right? It's like the main aspect of the project. And I'm just going to solo this, and I'm going to turn, actually, this is the reverb for that main lead, the return channel. I'm going to turn that off, okay? And I've got on the channel, I have this vintage verb reverb, and I'm turning that off as well. Just listen to this dry. Cool. All right. Now, what we typically want to do is, okay, let's get some reverb on this, right? It's a really dry sound. Put some reverb on. And I'm going to have the mix. I'm just going to ramp up the mix and listen to what happens. If you'll notice what happens there, the further I go with the mix knob, the quieter the actual dry sound gets until it gets to a point where it's only reverb, right? So we're totally washing away the original source sound coming out of Silent 1 here, and it's just reverb. And that's what happens when you put an effects plugin on the channel directly. If it has a mix knob, when you go to a high enough mix, typically about past 50%, the wet begins to get louder than the dry. And the further you go, if you go all the way wet, you are going to have only reverb. Now, the difficulty here is that if you want the reverb to be really loud, when you have it on the channel directly as an insert, the only way to make it louder is to turn up the mix knob. And that also has the effect of washing away and taking down the original sound. So there's not really a way to get maximum control and loudness over the volume of your effects while also maintaining maximum loudness on your dry signal. That is primarily where return channels come in. So what I did is I set up this return channel. Let's call this reverb. Okay, and let's turn it back on. Now, instead of having this reverb here on the channel and having to use the mix knob, I'm going to turn that off. And I'm going to go here. And the first thing to know about using return channels is that you have to have the mix knob at 100% wet on a return channel where you're using a send. Because instead of using this mix knob, now we are using this slider right here. In Ableton, this is a slider. In other DAWs, it is maybe a knob, or it looks a little bit different. But this becomes your wet dial, if you will. But there's no longer that same effect where when you turn this up, the dry sound starts to come down. The dry sound stays there, and we just turning up the reverb or the delay or whatever is on your return channel or on your send channel. So this stays at 100%, and we blend in the reverb with this knob instead. Here's the really, really cool part. I'm going to solo this return channel and listen to what this sounds like. I'm going to put this all the way at 0, so it's maximally sending the whole dry signal all the way into this return channel at the same time. But I'm going to solo the return channel and listen to what this sounds like. I'll turn these other effects off that I had, so you're just hearing the reverb. That is only the reverb signal, none of the dry. If I solo this channel, what you're going to hear is now both. And as you can see, when I turn that knob, it blends in the amount of that reverb. So lesson number 1 is you have a lot more control without dissipating your dry signal. You get to maintain that loud, clear synth sound or whatever drum sound or sample that's coming through on your dry channel. And you also get a lot of control over the volume of the actual reverb effect because you're treating them on 2 separate channels. The other great thing is, now that you have a channel that's standalone dedicated to that reverb, you can do effects specifically on that reverb signal. So I've got an EQ. This EQ is only going to affect the reverb. So I can EQ the reverb specifically without having this EQ have any effect on the dry signal. And that is huge because if you are sending, let's just continue going with reverb, right? Reverb doesn't need to have all of these lows. It's going to muddy up the mix a lot. So we can EQ all of that stuff. You can even put this on basses or sounds that you need the low frequency and just take the lows out of the reverb to help clean up your mix. Same thing with the high end. On this sound, I even have white noise. I don't want to take any high end off of that source sound, but I do want to take some of that harsh high end off of the reverb. And that is what you can do right here when you have it on a return channel. You can EQ it specifically with a great EQ plugin like, FabFilter or something, instead of having to rely on the low cut and high cut EQs in the synth, which aren't as precise. So that's another benefit there. You can also, saturate the reverb. You can also, I'm going to show you a really cool effect that you can do. You can side chain it as well. I don't always do this. You got to use your ears, but all I'm doing is I'm putting on here a couple things that just demonstrate the different ways that you can process your effects. All the possibilities really are endless because it has its own dedicated channel just for the effects. Let me show you one really cool example of something you can only do when you use a return channel or a send like this. You can put a compressor on, and I'm just using the Ableton stock compressor, and I'm going to put the side chain on. I'm going to route that side chain back to silent 1, which is the source synth, right? So if I turn the reverb off, that's that dry sound, the original sound. And the reverb has a compressor on it that's being side chained by the source sound. Listen, I'm going to turn this reverb on. Listen to what happens and watch what happens to this threshold every time one of these hits plays on the original dry signal. This is huge. Every time the dry synth plays a hit, I'm side chaining the compressor to duck the reverb out of the way so that you hear that dry synth noise really, really clearly. It doesn't take away and wash things out. This is a really common technique. And again, it's just one example of the many creative ways you can really get into the details with your reverb signals, with your effects, with your delays when you're using them on a return channel like this. So with all of that done, I'm actually going to leave this side chain off on the kick, and I'm just going to leave this processing on. Let's hear what this sounds like when I mix it in, everything together. I'm just going to solo the synth and listen to what this sounds now that we've kind of processed this reverb on its own on the return channel. You'll notice the difference that it makes when I turn off that EQ on the reverb. It actually cleans the reverb up a lot when I put that EQ back on. So let's play this in the context of the mix. All right, so we just talked about using it on one particular instrument to just separate the reverb or the effects signal to have more control over that effects. Another use that you can do for this, another really practical and mix improving type use case, is you can put it on a group. So what I have here is all of the percussion except for the kick. Take a quick listen. And what you'll notice about that is there's a very gentle reverb sort of just washing through the drums. And I'm going to solo that right here. I'm calling it the drum room. Okay. And it's just an Ableton reverb. Check this out. I'm going to solo this. Interesting, right? And the point of this is to give continuity to this drum group, because in real life, if someone's playing a drum kit, obviously that drum kit has a little bit of room reverb in it, right? Someone's playing a drum kit in a real life space where there's going to be a little bit of reverb. But in the electronic kind of digital domain, we have to replicate that, right? Because if we don't have any reverb on this and it's just the straight drum samples just dry, it's actually going to sound kind of unnatural, right? Because in real life, you never hear just a drum sound that's just completely zero reverb. It actually has this unnatural sort of weird effect in our mind. So it's nice to just put a little bit of subtle reverb just to give a more natural effect and give, kind of give that familiarity that, hey, when I hear these sounds in real life, I usually hear them kind of reverberating together in the same space. We can replicate that using a send. Now, why is this different than just putting the reverb right here on the channel, the group channel itself, and just doing the dry wet knob again for the same reason, right? So just keep in mind that the benefit of putting it on the return channel is pretty much always that you have additional control. And especially even if I'm not EQing things and I'm not doing any special processing, having this ability to blend this in without turning down my dry signal when I turn up the wet signal, that alone is a huge benefit to mixing, because I don't have to, again, decay away the volume of my dry signal. I keep those drums nice and punchy, and I just blend in the little bit of reverb that I want. So just to listen to that one more time, I'll put the drums on solo and I'll just blend this up and down, and you guys can hear how it sort of keeps the drums in the same space. They kind of share that shared room, if you will. You know, we can make adjustments to the reverb and get the effect that we want here on the channel. Take a listen. I'll just adjust this a little bit. I'll turn down the decay and we can hear what this sounds like. So you can hear when I turn off that reverb channel, it kind of just sucks the continuity out of the drums. They feel very dry and almost a little bit more disconnected. When I turn it back on, it kind of, again, just brings continuity because everything's sharing that same space. Okay, so I promised you guys I would show you a creative, interesting way that you can use this effect instead of just for mixing. And I want to show it to you here with this third channel that I have. This is another reverb, okay, and I had it off. But if I go back here, this reverb is on. And check this out, I have it automated so that it turns off right at the halfway mark. And I'm going to explain all of this. So what I'm doing here, and this is a really cool, interesting way. I don't think I've ever seen anyone actually explain this. I just tried this, and it's been something that I have been doing lately. Instead of putting in one of those white noise samples, you know, that swooshes up to create tension, you can actually use a return channel to create a more organic, sort of more, it's kind of integrated into your own track because you're going to use your own sounds to create this sort of tension and sweep in your music instead of relying on a white noise sample to do it. So check this out. What I've done is I've created a return channel that has a reverb on it. Again, 100% wet with a really long decay time. 16 seconds, right? So that's that really washy white noise type vibe. And I am automating this to go all the way up to 0. So basically this knob, this send knob is going to go all the way to 100. And again, if I didn't have this on a return channel, if I went all the way to 100 wet, the dry signal would disappear. So that's, again, the benefit of using a return channel. I can take this all the way up while still maintaining the volume of my drum group. And what I've done here is right when it gets to that point where I want to release the tension, I'm actually just automating that reverb to turn off. So I'm just going to turn on the drum group and listen to what this effect sounds like. It's just like a white noise sweep, but it's using our drums as the source sound, so it's a bit better than that. You hear that? One more time, we'll listen. Really cool, right? So that's just one example. You know, you could do the same thing with a delay. You could, you could even put like the endless smile on this reverb return channel and automate that endless smile going up. We can actually, let's do that together. Endless. Check this out. This will be fun. I have no idea what this will sound like, but this just shows you the type of options you have using return channels. So, okay, I'll just keep it on the default fist in the air one. Let's not go 100. Let's go 60. And then obviously I turn that back down. Let's hear what this sounds like. I'm going to solo the return channel just to hear this effect of this endless smile. All right, this is going to sound really intense. Let's hear what this sounds like in the mix. And I'm going to play the whole song and see if you can hear what I'm doing here, creating that tension with this reverb return. So it's kind of subtle, right? But could you hear that tension that we're creating with that drums? Obviously, if you layer in other uplifters and stuff as well, but that's just one more sort of thing that you can add to sort of bring some organic, natural effects into your song without having to rely on all those white noise sweeps and stuff. All right, guys. So as always, I hope this was helpful. I hope you're seeing some of the mixing benefits that doing things this way can have, as well as some of the creative opportunities that it can unlock for you. So try this in your next session, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.